So please hold your applause while I call everyone, and I apologize in advance, as they say at church. Please call it to my heart, not my mind. Excuse me, my mind, not my heart, if I mispronounce your name. So first we have from the administration, Michael Hine, Commissioner of New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. Howard Zucker, Commissioner of New York State Department of Health. Roberta Reardon, Commissioner of New York State Department of Labor. Sheila Poole, Commissioner, New York State Office of Children and Family Services. Ruth Hassell-Thompson, Special Advisor for Policy and Community Affairs, New York State Homes and Community Renewal. Kelly Owens, Executive Director, New York Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. My boss, Felix Matos Rodriguez, Chancellor of the City University of New York. Barbara Gwynn, Executive Deputy Commissioner, New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. And we have several elected officials joining us today. Senator Zellner Myrie, Assemblymember Pat Fahey, Assemblymember Nick Perry, State Senator Leroy Comrie, Assemblymember Diana Richardson, Senator Robert Jackson, Assemblymember Stephanie Zinnerman, Assemblymember Clyde Vannell, Senator John Brooks, Assemblymember Jennifer Rajkumar, Mayor Waylon Hobbs from the Village of Hempstead, and we have several advocates here. We have Mark Marial, President of the National Urban League and my former partner from my old days at DOJ. We have Rebecca Fisher, Executive Director of NYAGV. We have Hazel Dukes, President of the New York State NAACP. We have Jackie Rowe Adams, Harlem Mothers Save. We have Linda Bagel Schulman, founder of the Scott Beagle Memorial Fund. Reverend Franklin Richardson from Grace Baptist Church. Reverend Dr. Johnny Green from Mount Nebo Baptist Church and President and CEO of Impact New York. Bishop Orlando Finlater, New Hope Christian Fellowship. Pastor Carl Washington Jr., New Mount Zion Baptist Church and President of the Empire Baptist Missionary Convention. We have Iman Tahi Kukaj, Albanian Islamic Cultural Center. Chaplain Robert Rice, United Chaplain, State of New York. Pastor Carl Warp, City of Refuge, New York. Aisha Sekou, founder of Street Corner Resources. Pastor Jeffrey Crenshaw, New Mount Zion Baptist Church. Christian Hine, Vice President for Policy at Brady. All of the advocates for moms and students demand action. See them in their beautiful red. Gary LaBarbera, President, New York City Building and Construction Trades Council. Camera Jackson, Elite Learners. Julie Samuels, Tech New York City. And Erica Ford, founder, Life Camp, and the New York Fund Peace Coalition. Thank you all for your tireless advocacy and valuable input. Now you can speak. I want to thank Governor Cuomo for his leadership of New York State during our challenging and unprecedented time. We are grateful that he has chosen John Jay for today's important address. The events of the last year, including the COVID-19 pandemic, the protests against police violence, and rising rates of gun violence in communities across the United States, point to the urgent need to address public safety. And addressing public safety goes beyond responding to crime, but also includes addressing the racial and economic inequities in our communities. John Jay is in a unique position to help chart the future of our country's course on public safety. We are a majority-minority institution and reflect the voices of diverse communities across this state that need to be heard as we move forward. John Jay is committed to developing the research, policies, practices, and most importantly, the people who support safe communities. This is why last fall, John Jay, in partnership with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, brought leaders from all across the country, including police chiefs, community leaders, elected officials, and advocates to talk about how to create public safety that is community-led. Out of these meetings, we developed our Future of Public Safety framework to guide communities in a holistic approach to public safety, one in which the end goal is not the absence of crime, but where people's needs are met and they have the ability to thrive and be successful. Our future of public safety framework goes well beyond policing and calls on government and community to act together in a number of ways. Community members, especially young people, should be leading the conversation about what safety looks like and how to achieve it. Institutions beyond the police, such as public health agencies, community-based nonprofits, and all of us should play a central role in creating safety by preventing and addressing conflict through education, social services, and violence interruption, which you'll hear more about from the governor. Police departments must address both violence in the community and the role they have played in racial injustice in order to gain the community's trust. The governor's presence today is further validation of John Jay's work to promote safety, justice, and peace in partnerships with the communities and institutions they serve. Please join me in welcoming our governor, the 56th governor of the state of New York, Governor Andrew M. Cuomo.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. Oh, it's a better afternoon than that. Come on. Good afternoon. First to Madam President, Carol Mason with a K. Thank you. Thank you for hosting us today. Let's give Carol Mason a round of applause. We also want to thank John Jay for doing innovative work. We need a new model of public safety. That is clear. We need to restore the relationship between the community and the police. That is clear. And it's time to do it. It is time to do it. The community demands it. It takes thought. It's not easy. And John Jay, in many ways, is leading the way, and we're going to be partnering with them. So let's give them another round of applause. To all the elected officials who are here, to the assembly members and the senators, there are enough here, I think. We have a quorum. We could do a special session, but we don't want to do a special session. To the clergy members, pleasure to be with you. To all the advocates, to the civil rights organizations, to Hazel Dukes, because I'm not forgetting Hazel Dukes. If there's one name I'm mentioning, it's Hazel Dukes. Let's give Hazel a round of applause. Mark Morial from the Urban League, pleasure to be with you, Mark. All the gun advocacy groups that have done so much good work for so many, many years. You know the topic? The topic is gun violence, and let's talk about it. 2020, we don't want to go back there again. It was a year like we never saw before, and it was a year of crisis. The whole question for 2020 was just survival. We weren't living our lives, we weren't thriving. It was just a question of survival. I like to call it low tide in America, because COVID didn't come alone. COVID created a low tide. What does low tide mean? You go to the beach, and when the tide is up, it looks beautiful. You stand on the sand and you look forward and everything is beautiful. Low tide, the tide goes out and it exposes all this ugliness that was on the bottom. COVID created low tide in America. You saw the ugliness on the bottom that was there all along, but it was just covered up. What did COVID do? It hit the communities hardest that had underlying conditions, that didn't have access to health care, that were predominantly black and brown communities. That's what COVID did. When it came to education and remote learning, it worked great for some students who had the equipment, who had the help at home. But for poorer students, black students, brown students, they were left behind during remote learning. When it comes to the economy and jobs, it was those poorer communities and black and brown communities that had the highest COVID rate that actually had the fewest opportunities. Thank this room, because they were the first to stand up in the nation and say, when it comes COVID, testing and vaccinations, the black and brown and poor communities better be at the front of the line because they're the most highest price, and that voice echoed around this country. 2020, our issue was keeping people safe, and everyone agreed to it. Why? Because it was a matter of life and death. 2021, we're post-COVID. Knock wood, knock everything. We're post-COVID, but there's still low tide inequality, and it is still a matter of life and death. We went from one epidemic to another epidemic. We went from COVID to the epidemic of gun violence and the fear and the death that goes along with it. It's been all over the newspapers. It is undeniable. It's so bad that when you look at the recent numbers, more people are dying of gun violence than of COVID. More people are dying of gun violence and crime than COVID. 51 people died of COVID over the July 4th weekend. I'm sorry, 51 were shot, 13 died of COVID over the July 4th weekend. And that was just the July 4th weekend. Somebody said to me on July 4th weekend, those weren't fireworks you were hearing, those were gunfire that you were hearing. We're losing young people, we're losing them tragically, we're losing them needlessly. And gun violence and crime hurt all New Yorkers. We talk about getting New York back post-COVID. I'll tell you something. It's a different world. You're not going to take that Zoom and put it back in a box. You're not going to take remote work and put it back in a box. People have options. They spent a year working from home, working from other places. Okay, now you have to get back on the subway and back on the train and go to work every day. Well, hold on. I can stay home, and I can work from home. That would be devastating for the economy. People have to want to come back to work. They're going to have to want to come back to New York City. And the sine qua non for that, the but for that, is they have to feel safe. They're not coming back unless they feel safe. I can't tell you how many people tell the MTA, I'm afraid to get on the subways. I'm afraid to get on the subways. Now, this is a national problem. I get it. But somebody has to step up and somebody has to address it. And the place that should step up and address it is the state of New York. And we should do it comprehensively and honestly and creative. And that's what today is all about. Because this is the state, when it sees an injustice, we don't look the other way. We stand up and we fight it. And that's what we're going to do with gun violence. Let's start with the facts. Let's start with the facts. Forget the rhetoric, forget in politics, just facts, okay? Gun violence, #1 cause of premature death in the United States. Gun violence costs over $280 billion in health care societal costs every year. July 4th weekend, 14 people shot in Buffalo. 5 shot in Syracuse, 3 shot on Long Island, 2 shot in Utica, 1 was shot in Rochester. 26 people shot in New York City over the July 4th weekend. Shootings were up 38% in New York City over the first 6 months compared to 2020. Fact, gun violence discriminates. The way COVID discriminated, gun violence discriminates. When you look among the victims of gun violence, nationally, 59% non-white. New York State, 68% non-white. New York City, 77% non-white. Think about that. 77% black and brown. Black people are 10 times more likely to be victims of gun violence than white people. Latinos are 3.4 times more likely to be victims of gun violence than young people. Gun violence is a major civil rights issue today. Yes, education. Yes, employment. Yes, discrimination. But also gun violence. Gun violence is hitting the black and brown communities hardest, and it's compounding the damage from COVID. Now, what's the solution? There is no one solution. These great legislators can't go back to Albany and pass one law to do it. They already did everything they could. New York State passed the strongest gun law in the United States of America. We did that. We did that. It was called the SAFE Act. It did everything that this nation should do now. Why do you need an assault weapon to hunt a deer? Why? Why don't you do a background check? Why don't you close the loopholes? New York did it. We have those laws in place. Gun violence is not only taking a human toll, it's taking an economic toll. So we have no choice but to address it. It's the right thing to do. It's also the smart thing to do. And in many ways, this state can't afford not to do it. When you look at the past, as crime goes up, people in the city goes down. As crime goes up, the economy goes down. We've seen it, we've lived it. When you get a hold of crime, when you get a hold of gun violence, when that reduces, population increases. Economic activity increases. We know the pattern. We just don't want to relive the pattern. So the future of this state, the future of the black and brown young people, all depends on our ability to get this recent gun crisis under control. How do we fight it? You come up with a plan, and you do it. That's it. It's not that hard. Come up with a smart plan and do it. But I mean do it. Our strategy has to have two prongs. We have to have a long-term strategy, short-term. Long-term, the solution is a comprehensive community-based preventive strategy so young people don't get into this situation in the first place. They don't arrive at a place of crisis. You don't have the same level of violence. You don't have the same level of antagonism. And that's from community-based services. That's prevention, it's community development, it's housing, it's health care, it's economic opportunity. But today, let's focus on the short term, because people are dying every day out there. Time is not on our side. Begin by acknowledging the problem. And you know what the problem is? It is a statewide problem, and it is an emergency. And I want the people of the state to understand that. And I want them to respond to the emergency for the way it is. So today, first state in the nation is going to declare a disaster emergency on gun violence. Thank you. Thank you. What does this do, this executive order? First, it says to everyone in the state, I want you to understand the extent of the problem. I want you to understand how serious this is. It then also allows us to move even faster and free up money and free up programs so we can get it on the street, and we can get it on the street now. We also need a comprehensive plan of attack. We're going to have 7 steps. 1, treat gun violence as it is, which is really a public health emergency. That's what it is, and that's how we're going to treat it. Second, target the hot spots where the gun violence is coming from. It's not coming from every community everywhere. You can find out exactly where it's coming from, and you can target it. Third, you have to have a positive engagement with the at-risk youth. You can't just say, no, don't do it. You have to have a positive that you're applying. We have to break the cycle of the escalating violence because you see it coming. You see two groups fighting, 1 shot, 2 shot, 4 shots, 10 shots. You can interrupt that progression of violence, and that's what we have to do. We have to get illegal guns off the street, and we have to get the guns out of hands of dangerous people, and we have to rebuild the police-community relationship, period. Step 1, treat it like a public health issue. We know how to deal with an epidemic. What we want to say is, we want to do with gun violence what we just did with COVID. That's what we want. We want the same level of attention, the same level of energy. Look what we did with COVID. We had the highest infection rate in the United States of America for months. They looked at us and they pointed, oh, that's New York. That's a New York problem, COVID. Must be them. Must be the way they live. Must be what they eat. Something about those people in New York caused COVID. No, we didn't cause COVID. COVID came on the plane from Europe when we had the White House telling us it's in China, China, China. No, it left China, went to Europe, went to Italy, France, Spain, got on a plane, landed at JFK Airport, and infected New York. That's why we had the highest rate of infection in the nation. And we took that highest rate of infection on our own, and we brought it to the lowest rate of infection in the United States of America. That's what we can do when we focus and we all work together and we say we have to get this done. We need to do the same thing with gun violence. This is not just a criminal justice issue, it's a public health issue, it's a jobs issue, it's a substance abuse issue, and we have to coordinate them all together, and that's what we're going to do in New York State. We're going to create the first office to prevent gun violence in the Department of Health. We're going to come up with a comprehensive, organized, science and data-driven approach. We're going to make sure all the agencies are working together. We're going to reach out to the local community and make them part of it. We're going to issue an executive order today that says, I want from all the police departments across the state exactly where these shootings are happening so we have the information and we know where to target and we know where to address. We also want to form a council on gun violence prevention that gets your minds at the table to develop a strategy and the laws that we need to make a difference. And this council will make recommendations as to what laws are working and what laws are not working. It's got to put policy over politics. I'm tired of everybody using rhetoric on this issue. Pass the laws that save lives. Everything is on the table. We all want the same thing, and that's what we're going to do. Step 2, get smart. Use science, like we did on COVID. How did we attack COVID? We mapped it, and we found out where it was, and we found the clusters. And then we attacked the clusters. You can do the same thing with gun violence. You can look at where those shootings are happening, and you can attack them there. And by the way, they're happening in an incredibly small area that is creating the vast majority of the shootings. Buffalo, New York, 3.2% of the at-risk youth, 60% of the shootings. 3% of the youth, 60% of the shootings. Albany, 3% of the at-risk youth, 66% of the shootings. It's this way all across the state. Syracuse, New York, 2% of the at-risk youth, 47%. It's true in Suffolk. It's true in Nassau. It's true in Hempstead. It's true in New York City. 0.7% of the at-risk youth have done 36% of the shootings. 4,000 young men, 18 to 24, across the state, responsible for 48% of the shootings. Once someone tells you that, once you know that, what do you say? Reach out to those 4,000 young men in a state of 19 million and help them and stop the violence. And that's exactly what we have to do. You know where it's coming from. You know where you need to go. Step 3 is positive engagement. Don't do this, don't do that, don't take drugs, don't shoot. Yeah, okay. What am I supposed to do? What is my alternative? What am I supposed to do? Low tide in America. You know when you started to see the spike? During COVID. Why? I'm not in school. I have nowhere to go. I have no job. If you're rich, well, then you went out to the Hamptons. Then you went out to the Hudson Valley. Then your parents took you to Florida. They took you to Aspen. You had a lot of options. If you're not rich and you're living in public housing, you have the hallways to play in. Go spend a year running up and down the hallways. Go to the little broken down playground where you have nothing. No activities, no support, nothing. Why do kids get into trouble? What else are they supposed to do? Where was the productive activity? The best thing we can do for those at-risk youth, you reach them today and say, I'm going to give you a future, I'm going to give you an alternative, I'm going to give you training, and I'm going to give you a job. You have an alternative. It is a job. We have learned participation in summer jobs programs dramatically changes what happens, reduces violence by 45%, the summer jobs programs. That was all but gone last year. We have to create a jobs program unlike anything ever done before. We have to get everyone, the business leaders, the labor community, the government, and we have to create jobs for these kids to get them off the street. New York State will pay 100% of the salary. We just want them to get training and a place to go and that education so they see a future. Labor movement will be part of it. The big business organizations will be part of it. But we want every business opening their doors to employ these at-risk youth, and we want them doing it now. I want to thank Gary LaBarbera from Organized Labor and the Consortium for Worker Education. We're going to hire young people, train them, put them on the job, and then not just give them a job, but give them a good paying career when they finish with school, so they know this is not just a stopgap. You can be a carpenter, you can be an electrician, you can be a tradesman, you can have an entire future ahead of you. And that's what we're going to be doing. We are announcing today the largest investment in this type of jobs program ever, $57 million from the state of New York to create 21,000 jobs. Step 4. Break the cycle of escalating violence. Like COVID, gun violence spreads like a virus. 50% of homicides have been with people associated with gangs previously. There are young people out there who are not just shot once. They're shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And they've gotten lucky. There is an approach that says when that young person arrives in the hospital, you intervene at that moment with that young person. And you say, you were shot. Your attitude is you're going to get up and get out and go back to the street and shoot the guy who shot you. I know what you're going to do. You're going to get your friends, and now you're going to start a war. And there's going to be more people coming back. You intervene at that point, and you say there's a different way. That's where you catch them. That's where you grab them. That's where you put them on a different path. We did this program in a hospital in the Bronx, Jacoby Hospital. A place called the Giffords Law Center studied it. Shootings fell 60% in that precinct when you intervened with people through the hospitals. We have to do this statewide, and we're going to do it now. We know that snug programs work and outreach programs work. We're going to increase them by 112% immediately, so they are on the ground for this summer. And we have to create alternatives. You need sports programs and arts programs and training programs, and you need places that are open, and we're going to triple funding for those activities in these hot spots. Step 5, you have to get illegal guns off the street. Illegal guns. Why? With our law, it effectively has stopped guns. Thank God I don't even want to mention it. When you look at mass shootings, there is no state that has a lower number of mass shootings than this state. It is not a coincidence, it's because of our law. But the guns are still coming in. 74% of the guns used from out of state. They're coming from out of state. We have to stop the guns coming from out of state. We announced today a border war. And the border war is we're going to stop guns from coming in through our borders and into our cities. We know where they're coming from. They're coming from the south. And we're going to declare a border war to stop it. As a matter of fact, I have a vision. I have a vision of a border war. Because we wasted so much time and money in this nation fighting illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is not killing Americans. Illegal guns are killing Americans. So here's my vision. It just came to me. Picture the border. We build a wall. We build a tall, big, a beautiful wall. And we have the wall goes for miles. And we have a little gold leaf up at the top of the wall. Little gold shiny leaf. And then we put a big name across the wall. And the name is 5 letters. You know the name? I can see it. Can you see it? Cuomo. And it's a magic wall. People can pass, but illegal guns cannot pass. It's a magic wall. That's what we need here in New York, and that's what we have needed. Maybe that vision won't work. Okay, so we'll get the state police, and we're going to form a special unit in the state police to focus on the border and stop illegal guns from coming in. We're then going to work with our partner states, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. We're going to share all the data, get best practices on traffic stops. We're going to work together to stop the illegal guns from coming into this state once and for all. We're also going to say, New York is going to do what Congress didn't do. Congress actually passed a law that holds gun makers immune from lawsuits. Okay? I know this too well. Last year of the Clinton administration, we had the gun manufacturers were being sued manufacturers, and we said, we'll end these suits, but you the authorized user.